Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Box Office Talk. This is the show where I break down what happened at the box office, see if my predictions for the top 5 are correct, then make predictions for next week's top 5. So let's get right on into it. Last week I predicted that number 1 would be Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. Number 2 would be Regretting You. Number 3 would be Chainsaw Man, the movie, Rezark. Number 4 would be Black Phone 2. And number 5 would be Shelby Oaks. And man, really across the board on this one, I got a big old goose egg for my prediction. 0 correct. Some of you got close, but no one got a full 5 out of 5. Some people were putting a little bit too much hope in Shelby Oaks. Some of you weren't putting that much hope in it, but got some of the order for the other movies wrong. So no one got it right this weekend. Let's just dive right into what was number 1, which was Chainsaw Man, the movie. Even though I predicted that to be number 3, it turned out to be number 1. And in the back of my mind, I'm sure there was a part of me when I was making my predictions for last weekend where I was like, you should just predict that for number 1. Demon Slayer just did really well. This is another thing. But I think I was really overestimating the power that the other 2 movies coming out this weekend, the power that I thought they had. And we'll talk a bit more about them when we get to them. But yeah, just needless to say, I should never have underestimated the anime film. It made $17.2 million this weekend. This adds to a worldwide total of $108 million. Not sure what the production budget of this thing is. But I mean, you know, these things tend to do well these days, like pretty well, all things considered, like enough to get to number 1 at the box office. So, you know, Demon Slayer, obviously, even though it's not in the top 10 anymore, that just goes to show you that they can also do incredibly well. So there you go. I shouldn't have underestimated it. Number 2, I also shouldn't have underestimated Black Phone 2, you know, still clinging on here from last weekend, holding over pretty solidly, especially as far as the placement goes, despite the fact that we had 3 new wide releases, including Chainsaw Man and the other 2. This one held strong at number 2, making $13 million, adding to a domestic total of $49 million, so that does place it $41 million from the entire domestic run of the original film. Worldwide, though, it is at $80 million, so that places it $81 million away from the original film, but more importantly, that is $10 million shy of tripling their initial production budget of $30 million. So they were already, if I remember correctly, they were already over that initial production budget threshold last weekend, but now they've doubled it and they're about to triple that budget. So yeah, I'm sure Blumhouse is riding high right now. Just wait till you get to FNAF. This one is still doing fairly well. Now we can get to number 3, which is the other Mason Thames movie out this weekend, Regretting You. 2 Mason Thames in a row. How about that? It's the year of Mason Thames, really. He had How to Train Your Dragon earlier. That did really well. Black Phone 2 is doing well. This movie, we'll see. Had a solid debut for the initial production budget that it had of $30 million. That opening domestically being $12 million. Worldwide, it is at 22. So I feel like for these movies, not horrible. You know what I mean? Maybe it could have been a little bit stronger, and I do wonder how it'll continue to hold over because, I mean, you can already tell this is No It Ends With Us. If we can just compare that film real quick, that movie opened $38 million higher than what this movie opened with, and currently to catch up to that movie domestically, it needs $136 million to close that gap. And then worldwide, it's $327 million. So obviously it's off to a much slower, much smaller start than that movie. I'm not sure because I feel like the controversy stuff with Lively and Baldoni, that kind of came, that was a little more prominent after the fact, like after opening weekend. So I feel like, I mean, I think It Ends With Us is either Colleen Hoover's most popular book or one of the top 2. It's either that or Verity, right? So I mean, I'm sure that has a lot more to do with it. I feel like Regretting You might be one of those that, you know, it's popular because it's her, but it might not be uber popular like some of the other ones she's done. So that could account for it. Maybe some people saw the really bad Rotten Tomatoes score, like really bad reviews that were kind of, you know, leaking in, and It Ends With Us, although audience score was really high, it did have a bit of a mixed reception critically, so maybe there was already some people catching on through that. And also, yeah, it's almost Halloween, and you know, you got your anime fans going to see Chainsaw Man, you got people still wanting to go see Black Phone 2, and then you have some people going to our number 4 film, so it's kind of like split up in like a bit of a dry kind of like box office weekend. So yeah, I mean, either way, it could potentially have legs to get past its initial production budget and potentially double that, but right now it's just kind of a slower start, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Obviously not the big boom that I'm sure Paramount wanted, right? At least they got all their product placement in. All the films available on Paramount Plus are plastered everywhere in this movie. Number 4 is Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. Now, I was really thinking, this is Bruce Springsteen. He's a popular musician. People love him, surely. This is another music biopic film. It's coming out in like what, seemed like a pretty, like a dry kind of like October weekend right before Halloween. I thought this one would clear. Genuinely, I thought this one would do really well, and it only opened to 9.1 domestically. Now, worldwide, that does add to a global debut of 16 million on a budget of 55 million. So they are obviously a long way away from, crossing that initial point, doubling it. I know Jeremy Allen White is getting propped up as far as like awards campaign stuff. I don't think this will mess with that too much, obviously. But I mean, as far as like any commercial success that they probably wanted, because I'm looking at, the trends where like, Bohemian Rhapsody did incredibly well, the stuff like that. So I'm sure they wanted that with a movie like this. And A Complete Unknown just last year. Yeah, just last year, doing pretty solidly as well. So, oh well, this is not gonna be that unless it, has these incredible holds. But honestly, I don't really see that happening. I know the cinema score was solid, but I don't know. I feel like this is out, but it's not really making that much waves as far as like, no, this is really good. I feel like some people are just kind of like, it's the same as any other music biopic, or some people are just like, yeah, it's fine. And they're not really, even Jeremy Allen White, as far as like him, I feel like some people are just saying like, well, yeah, he's good, but they're not like, oh, but he makes it worth it, So I don't know how well this movie's going to hold over in the coming weeks. Probably not a whole lot. As far as director Scott Cooper, this opening weekend is 9 million over The Pale Blue Eye, but that's a Netflix movie. But it's also 9 million over Hostiles and Crazy Heart, since those movies open in more limited release and then, expanded later on. Antlers, 5 million over that opening weekend and 4 million over Out of the Furnace. It is 13 million below Black Mass, though, so that's Scott Cooper's kind of magnum opus there as far as opening weekends. And then as far as the domestic runs, it is 9 million over Pale Blue Eye, the easy Netflix one, but it needs 1 million till it outgrows its Antlers, so it's pretty much already there. And then for the worldwide numbers, it's 16 million over Pale Blue Eye and just 1 million over Out of the Furnace, and needs 19 million until it gets to Antlers there. So yeah, slower start for Scott Cooper, but obviously even Black Mass, it shows that even had a bit of like a smaller kind of slower start compared to like what it could have been. So, Scott Cooper, he just pumps these movies out. He doesn't pump them out, but he makes these movies, and they, kind of have this kind of slow kind of overall box office run. Some people see them, a lot of people kind of don't. They kind of just come and go is kind of the vibe. Unfortunately for him, I guess, but this movie's keeping with tradition. Number 5 is Tron Ares, making 4.9 million, adding to a domestic total of 63 million. So that does place it 109 million away from Tron Legacy at this point. Worldwide, it is at 123 million, so that places it 276 million away from Tron Legacy. Do you still care about Tron? Honestly, the fact that it's still kind of in the top 5 is kind of surprising. I don't know why, it just kind of is. But I really don't have much more to say. People have already kind of written this off as like, yeah, it's a failure. That budget of 180 million is too high. They're not going to break even, at least right now, but either way, even if they do break even later on, no one's going to be clamoring for another Tron movie right away, even once it even gets to that point, and still give them some time. So yeah, it's still here. Just leeching off of the other box office films here. Number 6 is Good Fortune, making 3.1 million, adding to a domestic total of 11.7. There's still no worldwide total that I could find when I was collecting the data, so it's still well below its initial production budget of 30 million. So yeah, not much great progress on that one either. I feel like any other time, like, earlier 2000s or 2010, whatever, a movie like this could have probably done a little bit better, or at least there would have been a bit of a bigger push as far as like, look at these, people doing a comedy. Seth Rogen, Keanu Reeves is doing jokes. It didn't really have great marketing, so I'm sure some people don't even know that this movie exists or that it was coming out. People are also, mentally kind of trained to expect comedies streaming because that's where a lot of them go, so whatever. Let's just get to number 7, which is Shelby Oaks. Obviously, I predicted this to be number 5, and I was a bit too optimistic with that one. But, it still had a pretty good weekend for the indie film that it is, for a film that was crowdfunded, made completely independently, and then a studio, Neon, came in and gave them a bit more money to do some reshoots and, kind of helped the film out. It made 2.35 million, which is pretty good. Now, Wikipedia lists the budget as 1.4 to 2.8. I think that is listed because the 1.4 is like the amount that was gained through the Kickstarter, and then reports were saying that Neon came in with the reshoot money and it doubled that budget. But according to producer Aaron B. Kuntz on his social media, he posted that Shelby Oaks actually made the money back, essentially. Like it made how much it cost to make the movie, including the Neon reshoots in this opening weekend. So something that Stuckman was kind of talking about in some interviews and in his videos is like, people are going to be looking at the opening weekend, right? Like that's kind of important. I know it's not, an opening weekend doesn't define a movie's journey, but some people are going to look at that. So hopefully, Mr. Stuckman, I don't know what the future holds for his filmmaking career. Obviously, I hope for the best because I've always been a big fan of his, and I still am a big fan of his. Hopefully, making your budget plus reshoot money back in your opening weekend is a pretty solid sign. Obviously the cinema score is a C+, and kind of some reactions are a bit more divided, so I don't know. I know Halloween is next week, but it's only on Friday, so it's not the whole weekend. I don't know if this one is going to hold over incredibly well. Hopefully this is good, is all I'm trying to get at here. Number 8 is One Battle After Another, making 2.33 million, so a little bit behind Shelby Oaks there. That adds to a domestic total of 65 for Leonardo DiCaprio. It is still behind Killers of the Flower Moon, but now just 3 million. Worldwide it is at 179 million, so it has outgrossed Blood Diamond for Leo by 8 million, but it's 4 million shy till Gangs of New York. So still rising on up there. Obviously we talked about last weekend how there was a report saying it needs about 400 million to break even, but we also talked about how it doesn't matter because the people that have seen it love it. People keep talking about it. This is going to be a movie that keeps getting discovered, and it's going to have a lot of awards love. I don't want to make any big predictions just yet, obviously, because we still have some ways to go until that, but I wouldn't be surprised if this got a lot of nomination love and potentially even some wins, who knows, because people seem to be really loving this thing. So who cares about breaking even at this point? For a movie like this, I know we always mention it, like this is like maybe not good enough to break even, or like this is what the studio's thinking for this movie, but in the case of One Battle After Another, this is one of those exceptions where it's like the legacy that they're kind of kickstarting and building up right now is more important than if they can break even in the theater, you know what I mean? Anyways, number 9 is Roofman, making 2.0 million, adding to a domestic total of 19.3. So domestically for the director, it's 2 million behind Place Beyond the Pines. So just a little bit shy of getting there. Probably will next weekend or the weekend after. Worldwide, there's a little bit of a total to bump it up. It's only at 21 million though. So 5 million over Blue Valentine, but 1 million shy of Light Between Oceans. That does get it past the initial production budget of 17 to 19 million. I genuinely don't know how much they would need to break even, though obviously our goal is like the doubling point. That's what we always say. That's kind of like our tradition point, right? But that's not always the case, and it's not like this movie has had like this great big like explosion of popularity, even though I feel like it could have. If you gave it just a bit more of like a marketing push, maybe, I'm not sure, but it's totally, good crowd pleasing, true crime kind of story, so I feel like this could have been bigger some other time, but similar to One Battle After Another, I guess this movie is just kind of, it'll probably get discovered more so later on. It just doesn't have the bigger kind of like box office boom that One Battle did. Anyways, closing out the video, number 10, Truth and Treason. Kind of surprised this is still here. I feel like if I didn't mention it last week, and maybe I mentioned it with some other Angel Studios releases, sometimes they open with these low numbers and then they'll immediately kind of drop off. So that kind of explains here, and it's sitting at 933,000, not even in the millions. That adds to a domestic total of 4.8 million. Still don't know what the budget of this thing is. Womp womp. But it did outgross Brave the Dark for Angel Studios by just a couple 100,000. It's 1 million behind The Senior, which came out like, 2-3 weeks ago? Maybe longer, who cares? You don't care. Now it's time for the fun part, the predictions for next week's top 5, and I really don't know. There's not like a big movie that's coming out, like Begonia is coming out, right? But really, it had its limited release this weekend. I'm not sure if this movie is like, I mean, it's been talked about, people, critics are loving it, but I don't know how many theaters it's getting released in. I'm not even really sure, like, what the like what audience is like anticipation for that, if there's like a drive for them to go like, oh yeah, I need to go see that. I'm not sure, it just seems like It just seems like this is going to be like Kinds of Kindness almost, where it doesn't get viewed as much. It needs like a Poor Things as kind of like awards campaign kind of push, which, it might be a little too early for that, right? But I did see that K-pop Demon Hunters is getting re-released again, so I'm gonna put it at number one, just because I honestly, it was hard puzzling this out, because I also think that number two will be Black Phone 2 once again, just in the sense of it's going to be Halloween, or at least close to, and it might not move just because, some people might have been waiting to see a horror movie here, so it might just stick around closer to the number two spot. It might not drop off that much. Number three, I think, could be Chainsaw Man, just because sometimes these anime films open big and then drop off drastically. I'm going to assume just because of the kind of very little competition, it won't be too much, but maybe not enough to fend off Black Phone 2. Number four, I think, could be Regretting You, and then number five, this might be a bit of a stretch too, but Back to the Future 40th anniversary release. I don't know. I checked the Fandango thing. It seems to be playing in enough theaters, and I checked like the Who's Bought Tickets Right Now thing, and some people already had, not like selling out, but like some people already did, so there's at least some kind of awareness that it's coming. So just considering how low these other numbers are, I'm trying. I'm trying here. This is really difficult time of year, it turns out. Anyways, what are your predictions for next week's top 5? Leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.